Hello and welcome to www.luxurytolast.com. Today we're talking watch collecting, and I've received an interesting email from a viewer, and they've asked me why does Patek Philippe offer quartz watches? And what they've said in their opinion, Patek Philippe should never offer quartz, so why do they? And this is a very interesting question because the trend with watches itself there is very much now for mechanical, that's automatic or manual wind type watches, and quartz is really shunned by the watch collecting community. And why is this the case? Well, this is a very, very interesting question that the person has posed here. The first thing is you must remember quartz itself, when it first came out, it was looked upon as the next leap in watchmaking technology. I mean, we do look at quartz now and say, oh, it has no soul, it's this, it's that. But when quartz came out and started to hit the market in the 70s, the predictions were that watchmaking was never going to be the same again. And what the predictions were is that mechanical watches would have absolutely no value or worth. Now, this might sound ridiculous now with hindsight, but this is what happened. Don't ever forget that in the 70s, with the quartz revolution, hundreds of independent watchmakers were forced out of business. Quartz did change the marketplace. Now, in the same token, mechanical watches, they've taken the very upper echelon, and they've become a piece of art, and they've become a very collectible thing. But if we go back to the 70s, the thinking was that things would never go back to mechanical watches. Now, there's obviously a lot of flaws with mechanical watches. I know myself as a dealer, if I'm buying a second-hand mechanical watch, the thing that always scares me is if the circuit plays up, if it gets water in it, or if it goes wrong, you're really quite stuck, because often you can only use a quartz circuit from the original manufacturer. So you're in for a very expensive repair. Now, when quartz came out, that fear wasn't there. Everyone thought quartz, well, there's no moving parts, less wear, it'll last forever. And this is the case. Now, as far as quartz goes, people say to me, well, why did Patek Philippe offer quartz? Why did so many great makers? Now, it's not just Patek who offered quartz. Audemars Piguet offered quartz. Vacher and Constantin. These are some huge names in watches. Rolex had a quartz line. That's right, they did. They had the oyster quartz line. So people will say, well, why did they do that? Well, you've got to remember, the thinking at the time was completely different. The best way I can describe this to people is, look, at the moment, big style watches are all the vogue. Okay, big 40 mil plus watches. I've got a Patek Philippe Grand Tourly, 37 mils, and look, in the 1950s or 60s, Patek Philippe would say that's sloppy and ugly. They would not make a watch like that. Tastes have changed, and that's exactly what's happened with quartz. Quartz it was very, very popular, and it's only now that the collector market has shunned it and it's become sort of an oddity. However, for 90% of people who are not watch enthusiasts, quartz is the best solution possible. And it's just an inexpensive, accurate way of keeping time. And with these new, like Citizen's got the Eco Drive, Seiko's got the Kinetic system, they also limit the number of battery changes that are necessary. So quartz itself, for non-watch enthusiasts, is a great way to go. As far as watches go themselves, there in the 1970s, it looked like quartz was going to be the new technology and it would never ever. A lot of companies sold, they were bankrupted. This is how serious it was. A lot of the mid-range companies were bankrupted and they sold their tools often at scrap prices, and some of them went to China and places like that. Now this is what happened. And I know it sounds awful today, but at the time, the best way I compare it to, in the 1970s when quartz was at its peak, they were thinking that the old mechanical watches had gone the way of the horse and buggy. That's right, the horse and buggy when the car came out. And this is exactly the thinking. Who now buys a buggy? And the market, there's a small market for horse and buggy and coaches and that, but most people buy an automobile. The technology's jumped ahead so much. That's exactly how it was with quartz. Quartz was really, really trendy. And look, the thing is, Patek and Rolex, they actually helped initiate the technology. They had a lot of involvement in early quartz technology. So it wasn't the Japanese who had actually invented the technology as such. It was a world event. A lot of watchmakers were dabbling in it, and the Swiss were actually quite advanced in technology. And the Patek Phillipe makes a lot of marine chronometers. This is in early quartz times, and they were a leader. Patek has been a great leader in quartz technology. So you certainly couldn't say that the Swiss were behind the eight ball. It's just that the Japanese revolutionized the market and slaughtered the competition. The interesting thing is, with quartz itself there, take the smartest investor in the world, Warren Buffett. What watch does he wear? He wears a Patek Philippe Calatrava. Okay, you can all expect that. 3944. What's a 3944? It's a Patek Calatrava with a quartz movement. And this is the thing. Quartz was not shunned. It was, if you look at the prices in the 70s and 80s of a quartz piece compared to a mechanical piece, they were pretty well on par with each other. And this is the whole thing. The market sentiment was completely different. The only way I can describe it, as I said before, is to compare it to the fashion for large size watches now, the big diameters. Well, back in the 70s, that enthusiasm was for quartz. That's right, it was for quartz. And you've got to remember too, a Patek Philippe quartz watch is still a very finely made watch. It's not a cheap type of thing at all. The cases are still made by hand in the traditional way, the hands, the dials. It's just that it's got quartz technology. Some of the Patek Philippe and the Rolex quartz pieces are some of the best quartz watches known to man. And even Rolex had the Oyster Quartz range. They needed to bring it out because quartz was so popular. That was the trend. Oh, it's latest technology. You've got to remember the time there. It wasn't looked down upon like it is today. And it's funny, I can even remember going back 5 or 10 years ago, and yeah, quartz was losing its flavour with collectors, but it wasn't as terminal as it is now. And I remember pieces like the Cartier Panther. That's only ever been available in quartz, and they were really good sellers 5-10 years ago. Now that watch has become harder to sell because quartz has really lost its flavour, and this is how trends change, and this is why it happens. I will say one thing, and that's that for women's watches, quartz is really a very good technology. There was an interesting video I was watching on YouTube called Time Machines, and in that video there itself there, one of the head people from Gerard Perregay, he was relating that when he was in the watch retail business, he'd have men would come in and buy an expensive watch for their wife. They'd always buy the mechanical version because they couldn't justify a huge price for a quartz piece. And within a couple of weeks, the watch would be returned, and it would be swapped for the quartz version. And that's exactly right. For a lot of watches, women just like to put it on and wear it. They don't like to set it, muck around with it like men. Men like to fidget with gadgets, whereas women like something which does what it needs to do, and is accurate and honest. And that's not criticizing women at all, because women, of course, love jewelry and pieces like that. But it's a very interesting comment. Up until about year 2000, Cartier and Patek Philippe, all their women's watches were quartz. It's only since year 2000 that both those makers have gone back into making quartz pieces. And that's a very, very important thing to realize there. And for quartz pieces themselves there, Patek Philippe and Rolex are two fantastic brands of watches which had a great history in quartz development. And look, it's not only a Patek thing. A brand like Audemars Piguet, I mean, it doesn't get any better. I mean, what are the top watchmakers in the world? You're looking at Patek Philippe, you're looking at Breguet, you're looking at Audemars Piguet, you're looking at Vacher and Constantin, and you're also looking at Lange. Well, the truth is, quartz was such a strong movement, such a strong demand for it from customers, that all those makers, you've had to have quartz pieces there. And I mean, I don't care what anyone says, it was the way the industry moves. And I mean, look, the best way I could say it is looking at I've got a Vacher and Constantin 1950s, 1960s dress watch, and it's a wafer thin manual wind watch. And it's a beautiful vintage piece, but the fashion was for small. It's 33mm across, and it's even made to look even smaller than the 33mm. That was the emphasis. Petite little watch, which was a gent's watch. It certainly wasn't feminine. It's a masculine watch, but that was what good watchmaking was. It was to make it as small as possible, and it was also to make the piece as thin as possible. And that was the fashion. Simple as that. That was the fashion. Fashions change. In the 70s, quartz was a great booming technology there, and the luxury watchmakers had to offer pieces. If they didn't, they would have been slaughtered. And that is exactly why these makers released quartz pieces. And look, I don't think, personally, I've struggled with quartz pieces. I've owned a Patek Calatrava, which was quartz, and I found it, at the end of the day, the quartz mechanism in it, I found it very tough to have that piece in my collection and justify it when it had the flaw of having quartz in it. But that's not to say it's any less a watch. It's just a piece with quartz in it. And look, I think yourself, you've got to, in watch collecting itself, you've got to always realize that fashions change, styles change, and the technology changes. And I don't think we'll ever see mechanical watches not being made. They've had such a resurgence, and it's an appreciation of the fine watchmaking skills. But when looking back in history, you can understand why these makers needed to offer a quartz watch. And for ladies themselves there, quartz is a great solution. I mean, Cartier themselves and Patek Philippe still offer ladies' watches in quartz. And a lot of these makers now have dropped quartz lines for men. Patek no longer has a quartz line for men. And Rolex has also dropped the oyster quartz range, and that's just everything you've got to understand. Swiss watchmakers, any industry, it's consumer driven. What does the consumer want? And to be a successful company, you need to answer that question. What does the consumer want, and how do we fulfill that need? And that's why quartz came on the scene. I don't think quartz is a terrible technology. I think it's an amazing technology, really. If you think about the accuracy and how it works, it's a fantastic technology that came out. But personally, in a luxury watch, I'd much rather have mechanical parts. I find it more honest and it has soul. I hope you've enjoyed watching this video here on watches and why quartz existed, and is quartz a bad thing, or what's the reasoning behind it? I hope I've answered those questions, and please keep watching my videos and coming to my website www.luxurytolast.com. Thank you.